All right. Just waiting for 1 second, guys, here before we get started. All right. Turn that off real quick. All right. What's going on, guys? Steve Pintado back with you once again, tuning in to my 32 teams in 32 days segment. As you guys already know, if you have been watching or if you're new, I am the host of the Fantasy Coaches podcast and a member of Unwrap Sports Network. Coming out to you here to do this, amazing thing I've been trying to do, kind of give everyone a quick 15 to 20 minute analysis on every single player that could be fantasy relevant early on this season that you could draft in your drafts coming up. We may talk to we may talk a little dynasty, we may talk a little keeper, whatever, 16-man leagues. We may talk a little bit all about all that today. But if you haven't been watching, I've done the Washington team, the Titans, and the Bucks so far. Now we're on the Seahawks today. And Seahawks, tremendous team last year, provided plenty of fantasy assets for us consistently throughout the entire, season last year. And we're going to start right with the top of the list, the alpha dog, the big money, Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson, he is as consistent as they come in terms of fantasy football the last couple of seasons now. He finished 5th overall. Just a really good quarterback you can get in those middle rounds. Won't be late, but middle rounds if you want to make sure you have a secured quarterback, most weeks. And that's kind of what you get with Russell Wilson. He's, like I said, been consistent as it comes. He's been a number one quarterback every year since 2012. He always throws very minimal interceptions. Turnovers are never a big issue for him. He's always provided a very solid rushing floor consistently. So you saw last year a little lower than usual, but 340 yards and 3 touchdowns. Not a horrible situation to go there, but he's consistent, and that's what you really look for in a quarterback. He obviously has new weapons that he can go to, and some downfield ones. I mean, he was second and third in red zone and deep ball attempts last year, fourth most completed air yards with Metcalf downfield. He got a lot. He got that deep ball down the field a little bit more. Just a clean pocket consistently, always someone who just consistently has a strong accuracy when it comes to playing quarterback. And he was number one when he had a clean pocket. Man was a beast when he had the ball. He had no pressure, nothing to worry about. Again, he has stud wide receivers. He's got a good run game. He's got, at least someone of a tight end one every single week, no matter what. And he's been the driving force of the season. Now, last year, a little concern. During the second half of the season, you saw a bit of decline in his game. He was only QB 16 from week 9 on. Just 2 games with just more than 1 passing touchdown. Not what you really want in your quarterback. And it could be a number of things. I mean, the offensive line wasn't that great. Late in the season, he lost his top tier. Hey, Blue Jay Don, thanks for joining. Appreciate that. He lost his running game late in the season. We lost Tyler Lockett for a shorter period of time. So when you look at that and you're like, well, he kind of screwed me in the fantasy playoffs. Well, look what he had around him. He had a lot of issues going on last year, and especially late in the season, especially after Tyler Lockett went down in week 9, things didn't look the same, of course. And then I think that took a big hit on Russell not to have those weapons. I mean, David Moore after that was his best weapon after Metcalf. So, you take a big downgrade in those weapons. So when you look at Russell Wilson for 2020, you should really think of him as a pretty stable, consistent, floor given, no turnovers, upside, an offense that supposedly run first, but there's a good chance that they kind of have to pass a little bit more this year with the lack of a good run game possibly, and we'll talk about that in a few. But Russell is a great round 5, 6, 7 quarterback. If you want someone that's consistent after you get some of your big stars, you really can't go wrong with Russ because he puts up a QB1 finish every single season. So Russ, pretty good overall for him. Going to the running back core, start from the bottom up. Travis Homer played a couple games late last year as when Chris Carson and Rashard Penny both were out. Had 10 carries for 62 yards in week 17. Nothing great, but not disappointing. He had 17 targets over the last 4 games of the season. Coming out of college, he was a pretty reliable pass catcher and pass protector. Probably don't see him. He might have a shot. If Rashard Penny goes on the pump for 6 weeks, he might have a shot to stay on this team, maybe be involved in somewhat. But he's an undrafted guy right now, and until kind of proven otherwise, and you can kind of show it on the field. DJ Dallas was their, fourth round pick in the 2020 draft. A better dynasty option because I think he could see better value in 2021, 2022 if, Chris Carson is a free agent after this year. Rashard Penny just hasn't been able to stay healthy. So he could be a real up and coming. Hey, thanks for the thumb ups. I appreciate that. It could be a big up and coming this season. Hey, Perry, what's going on? Keep killing it. Absolutely. I'm running on multiple streams here, guys. So I'm getting chats from different directions here. So I appreciate that. So DJ Dallas, what did he do? He was a solid stud. He's a 2-down back, really. He's a between the kind of tackles kind of guy, bulldozer people over, physical runner. Wasn't a big pass protector, or I said pass protector in college. Needs to work on that if he wants to kind of continue his game. Back-to-back, 600-yard rushing seasons, 14 touchdowns over his last 2 seasons in college. He switched actually from a quarterback from in high school to a running back. So he's relatively new at the position, but, he shows that trait that he could be a really not stud, but a stout 2-down runner in the NFL level. But in terms of 2020 right now, he's not draftable unless something were to happen to Chris Carson to go on the pump as well with Rashard Penny, who's currently on the pump, but we'll talk about him in a minute. So right now, pretty much undraftable. But if you see something happening to the top guys, he could see some of a value later in the season. Carlos Hyde, next on my list here. You saw him sign with Seattle. Kind of didn't like it at first. I think him coming aboard is kind of just a safety thing for, hey, Brendan Gavin, 22, what's going on? Kind of a safety thing for Rashard Penny if he is to be out for, 6 games. So I think that's kind of why they brought him in here. And then also obviously a little bit towards Chris Carson's injury as well. But what can we really say about Carlos Hyde? I mean, he had a career year last year, his first year over 1,000 yards. That was great for him. He was someone who, averaged 15 carries a game. He had 6 games with 10 or more fantasy points, pretty solid power runner. Could help any team with 200 plus carries. He can carry a workload if that's the case, but he isn't a passing down back. I mean, just 20 receptions in the last 2 years. He's only had one real reception-like season, and that's when he was with Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco many years ago, it seems like at this point. Besides, after that, I mean, he's just not a guy who's going to catch the ball in the backfield very well. And his value right now is, it's like a late-round pick. If you want to take a shot on him to see maybe if you want to grab him and hold on to him for a few weeks, maybe Chris Carson's injury is a little more severe than we thought once he gets on the field. Hey, going for gold, what's going on? That could be something you hold on, the Carlos Hyde for sure. It definitely, is a safety blanket maybe for Chris Carson, or if you didn't get the running back depth you wanted, in your draft, you could go and grab a guy like Carlos Hyde and see if Chris Carson's injury kind of nags him, keeps him out, and then Carlos Hyde would see a bigger workload, be a possible low-end RB2 for you in fantasy and half point and standard. So that's really what you're looking at with Carlos Hyde right now. Rashard Penny, he is on the pump currently. There's a shot he could still be off it. But as a former first-round pick, I mean, he's almost a bust. It's coming to that. He missed 8 games over the last 2 seasons now. Been on the IR back-to-back years now at this point. Coming off an ACL tear that usually takes 6 to 9 months to recover, and he did that back in late November. He's kind of on track for the season. Again, he's on the pump. So if he stays on the pump, he's out for 6 weeks. And basically, what he was able to do last year, he had some eye-opening stats in week 12 and week 13 where he's very productive. I mean, he was an RB3 overall in those 2 games combined. And why was he at RB2 in those games? And I talked about Rashard Penny in one of our podcast episodes where what it was, yes, he saw a big workload. The run team, both those teams were pretty average run defenses as well. And you saw, the first game, you saw Chris Carson kind of get a little banged up, which kind of, I think, led to Rashard Penny seeing more touches in that game because I think they really like Chris Carson. And Rashard Penny, unfortunately, just, he saw more opportunity during those 2 weeks. And again, who wasn't there those 2 weeks? Tyler Lockett was not on the field during those 2 weeks. And that could really tell you something. They had to use their talented players, and that's the best way they could do it, by running both these guys who have both had really good games there. And Penny just did a little bit more, of course, because he's got that talent to him to be real electric on the field. Again, he hasn't been on the field enough to show it. And when it comes to, what we're talking about with Rashard Penny right now is that if he's on the pump, he's not a draftable player in my eyes, guys. It just doesn't seem right to draft a guy who's going to be out at least 6 weeks, and then he has to get back in a little football shape. He's got to be worked back in the offense a little bit. So again, he's more of that, first month pickup, because unless you have the spots, unless you have an IR spot on your team that allows you to put pump players there, he's not really draftable. Again, if you have an IR spot you can put him onto, I would pick him up late in the round and just stash him there and see what's possible, because he does have that talent to really succeed. But it's just that he hasn't really stayed on the field enough to show it. And I really don't want to get a guy and put him on my bench if you don't have that IR spot for 6 weeks for a guy who I haven't even seen be productive enough for me to want to put him there, like a Kareem Hunt was last year for 8 games. We haven't seen that kind of, consistent production from him, like a Kareem Hunt. So, if he's on the pump, he's an IR spot or undrafted. If he's not on the pump, he's more of a double-digit round guy, and take your shot on him, because I still think this is Chris Carson's team. It'd be a miracle that he's not on the pump the first 6 weeks, but if he's not, he's definitely a double-digit round 12 to 14 kind of guy you can grab as an RB depth to see if he has that opportunity to see a bigger workload. And then Chris Carson. Chris Carson, fantastic season last year. He had 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns, including receiving, almost 1,500 all-purpose yards. The guy was a beast. And he's coming off back-to-back 240, 1,100-yard seasons now. He improved last year on his target ability overall, which was really good to see that he didn't show before. It kind of made him a little bit more value in more of a PPR league format. But again, he suffered an unusual hip injury, and if you ever want to hear about the hip injury a little bit more, we have our guy who comes on every once in a while. His name's Edwin Paradas. He is the doctor on Twitter, I believe FFB doctor, something like that. I'll get the right one there for you by the end of the show, hopefully. But he's fantastic. He knows his medical stuff inside and out, and if you want to listen to that, it's episode 64 on the Fantasy Coaches podcast. He was saying it's a very unusual, rare injury that he's never really seen it for an NFL player. So, thanks for the tip. I appreciate that. Rare, unusual player there. And the big thing about that is that it could just be something that heals and we don't have to really worry about it. Or it's something that could be lingering and could be re-injured because he didn't get surgery, could be re-injured for the season. So he's like a really big risk guy. And when you look at him this year, yes, he had fumbling issues too. So there's some red flags on this guy, Chris Carson, right now. He is 10 now in 2 seasons. But if it was a different team, Pete Carroll just loves Chris Carson. And that's something you really need to look at. As long as he's on the field and he can play, he'll be real competitive as an RB2 right now. Again, there's some risk. I think he's a better round 5, round 6 kind of guy than take him in round 3 or 4, just because of the injury and the fumbling issues. But you're getting yourself a pretty strong RB2 if he's healthy and can play at least 16 games for you this season. So that's where Chris Carson stands right now. Going to the wide receivers, talk about 2 quick ones real quick. That's not wrong team. David Moore, 3rd-year wide receiver or 4th-year wide receiver now. Kind of just around on the team there. Kind of was a spark in 20. He's a 3rd-year guy now. 2018, he kind of showed some spark as a rookie. Hey, Steph Lever, 29th, 83. What's going on? He showed some spark as a rookie, but kind of regressed in 2019. He saw opportune moments. He had the 4th most snaps on the wide receiver core, so he more than likely could see, some kind of, fantasy relevance throughout the season. Maybe a game or 2 here where he sneaks a touchdown. But again, not a guy you're looking to draft right now. But in deeper man leagues, he could be someone who can see a big enough role to be a bench player for one of your, deeper man leagues. Philip Dorsett, another guy who could be a deeper man guy, going to be third on the wide receiver depth chart probably. Maybe they're going to fight. We'll find out probably as it get closer to the season. But Philip Dorsett has never lived up to his round 1 value since being drafted with the Colts. Last year, he actually had the second most receiving yards with the Patriots. So he had value last year with the Patriots. Again, there's top 2 wide receivers here, so you probably won't see that value. You're looking at similar stats with almost 400 yards and 5 touchdowns, probably less touchdowns this year, and just about as many receiving yards. Again, a guy who's probably a deeper man league who can have a couple weeks here and there with kind of fantasy relevance, but another undrafted guy until further notice. And then we go to DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf, what can we say, man? This guy has been a star in the making since coming in the NFL last year. Pretty good rookie season, finished 34 overall. Had some really good blow-up games, I think, 1 or 2 here and there. but provide a pretty solid floor last year for most of the season. I mean, he's a great blend of size and speed who gives matchup problems for any defender. He needed to prove on more of a route running ability that he's working on this coming offseason here. And what's his outlook this year? And again, in dynasty formats, he's a guy you really want to grab right now to have with Russell for the next 6 or 7 years. Even though you shouldn't look that far ahead in dynasty, but in terms of redraft this year, he's probably going to be playing some tough competitions because he's going to be the outside receiver most of the time. So he's going to probably play some Patrick Peterson, Richard Sherman a lot of times, Jalen Ramsey. So he's going to have some tough competition. So you're going to have to realize that he may not be a blow up season that everyone's predicting. And that's why I'm cooling my horse just a little bit on DK Metcalf. Just because I think while he could probably have a better season than 900 yards and 7 touchdowns, there's going to be a couple games where he really kind of shits the bed and kind of just mediocre at best against some of these better cornerbacks that are in the league right here. And I would just proceed with caution. Again, he's a wide RB2. He's a wide receiver 2 in fantasy right now. You get him in round 5 or 6. Possibly round 4 if you're feeling, a little crazy there to grab him. But he's got tremendous talent and he's got big upside. He just needs to get and kind of show his worth against some of the bigger defenders in the league. But if he can do that, he's a guy who can show big upside in his game. Tyler Lockett, the presumed number 1 or 1B, 1A, whatever you want to call it. Last year was after his 2018 crazy statistical season. He came back and proved that he's a legit wide receiver in this fantasy world right now. And he was really good. I mean, he was pretty dominant most of the season there. I like what he was able to do. He had that injury in week 12 that he had to go to the hospital for. It was really bad. And he came back 2 weeks later and he had a couple bad games since then, but put a big number still. And one of the biggest things I noticed was that he was second ranked in the league in red zone reception. So Russell Wilson looked at his way anytime they were in the red zone. If you want that for that touchdown upside, hey, thanks for the popcorn. I appreciate that. Russell Wilson is going to continue to look for Tyler Lockett in and week out, and he's a pretty solid wide receiver 2 in fantasy still as well with Metcalf. I think both of these guys could thrive on the field. If you choose to go to the route where you take maybe 3 running backs early, if you want to have that kind of opportunity this year to make sure you're okay on your running backs, Tyler Lockett, I wouldn't hate him as a wide receiver 1 if that's the case in round 4 or round 5 where you can get him, because I think he puts up pretty good value as that position. Again, I'd like to see a little bit more out of him, 82 receptions. I'd like to see him get closer to 100 this year, a little bit more than just 1,000 yards, but he could really see double-digit touchdowns this coming season. And this offense that's probably going to need to pass the ball just a little bit more with the run game kind of more on the unknown side right now. So Tyler Lockett, good wide receiver 2. Then we go to the tight ends, and we're almost done, guys. We only got a couple more minutes here, so that'll be quick. Jacob Hollister, we remember him last year, kind of came out as a tight end 11 down the stretch, having some pretty good games that kind of made him fantasy relevant. It seemed like if you're a tight end in Seattle and you're starting, you're going to have a good game more times than not. They brought him back on a 1-year deal. It seems a little odd. They actually tagged him with a transition tag. But I don't really see him performing like he did last year because, and again, he could easily because the people in front of him. But right now, if you're looking to draft him, he's definitely not a guy you're looking to really want to draft right now because he just doesn't put up fantasy value until someone else in front of him gets hurt right now, which is very possible. Then the next guy is Will Disley, big old Will Disley, dominant tight end who just can't seem to stay healthy. I mean, 2018 is a top 12 tight end first 4 weeks, then tore his tendon ruptured. And then 2019. Played 2 games more than 2018, 6 games. He was a top 5 tight end. He was dominant. And then, unfortunately, again, he tore his ACL. Tore his Achilles this time, I'm sorry. And went on the IR. Again, this is a guy, I think if you want to draft him with one of your last picks of your draft, I would consider it. I know the guy we're talking about next, Greg Olsen, is maybe the presumed starter, but maybe it's Will Disley still. We don't really know. Just because Greg Olsen's coming to town doesn't mean he just gets the starting job. He is older, much older than Will Disley, and Disley has a connection already with Russell Wilson, as we've seen already. We had 4 tight end 1 performances in the first 6 weeks. I mean, that's pretty freaking good. So, again, maybe if you're one of your last picks around 16, 15, whatever it may be, to take a shot on a guy like that, if you like that 2 tight end set, to see if maybe he kind of shows his worth early on. If not, I think he's a good just dump him at that point. But if you want to see if he can be a good tight end 1, there's a possibility. He just needs to stay healthy and be on the field and see those targets. So Will Disley, last kind of pick kind of guy, maybe undrafted if anything. Then we go to Greg Olsen, which I believe would be the probable starter. They brought him in on a contract, 2-year contract or 1-year contract, and this is last year. So they're probably going to use him as much as they possibly can because we all know he's going to go to the booth next year. And Greg Olsen hasn't been the same guy since his early 2010s. I mean, he was dominant from 2014 to 2016 with 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. The last 3 seasons, he had barely 1,000 yards combined. He's dealt with a lot of injury, missed 18 games in that time frame, and while he was able to stay healthier this past season, he dealt with some pretty uneven quarterback play with Kyle Allen and obviously Cam Newton for 2 games. But he's going to get a guy like Russell Wilson who really does look for the tight end position a lot, especially in the red zone many times. And I know he's older at 35, but again, maybe another late round kind of guy to see if you rather take that approach with the tight end position. If you do the waiver tight ends, that could be something to look into. He's got good matchups early on in the season. So I would definitely want to take advantage of something just like that with Greg Olsen. But again, a later round guy isn't somebody you should be drafting to be your presumed tight end 1, but more of a backup, or if in those deeper man leagues, take that kind of route. So that is the Seattle Seahawks, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been having a lot of fun being able to do these things. I just like talking fantasy, guys, so I appreciate it. If you want to hear more things, I am the host of the Fantasy Coaches podcast. We have a whole website at www.thefantasycoaches.com. We have a lot of podcast episodes. You can find all these streams here on Sportscaster, or you could just do it here, wherever you may be. So I appreciate you guys for listening in today. Tomorrow night, I'll be back on again, probably somewhere around 9 p.m. I'll be doing the San Francisco 49ers, the NFC champs. So that's going to be a lot of fun to talk about with everyone. The Debo injury, the Jordan Reed signing. So look out for that. Thank you guys for listening. Tune in next time. Take care now. Bye.